Hi, my name is Makayla Harris and I attend Bowie State University. I'm here with the wonderful Dr. Davis and she'll be telling us about her book, A for Anacostia.
Thank you so much, Makayla. I'm really excited to be here with you and to answer your questions and share some information about the books.
So I'll start with the first question, which is who and what inspired you to become a writer?
I'm going to say my parents did. And they did that by filling the house full of books, magazines, picture books, constantly telling stories from my grandparents on down about families and just current events. So I guess my parents.
Okay. My second question is, how did you begin the writing process when you have a new book idea, and what is your favorite part about the writing process?
Okay. For me, the writing process started with me being a teacher in Southeast. And I was working with some little ones, pre-K and kindergarten students. And we all live in Anacostia, and I noticed that we were working on the alphabet and the sounds of letters, and I wanted to connect the alphabet to our community, and I didn't find any information on their level, on that grade level for students. So I went to the library. If you're familiar with Anacostia, I went to the library on Alabama Avenue. I went to the library right there on Good Hope Road, and though they had many wonderful books, I couldn't find anything for a younger student. So I said, well, I'm going to do what teachers do. I'm going to create what we need for the kids. And so initially it started out with just, okay, this is just for the small group of kids that I'm working with. And I thought, well, after I really got into the process of writing it, and I said, well, this may be an idea for all of the pre-K, and then all of the kindergarten, and then like that's it, just all the pre-K. We have like 3 classes of each class. That's enough. And I was like, no. I started talking to other teachers and sharing the information, sharing my writing with them, and they were saying, yeah, I want to use that for my classroom too. I said, okay, let me, for the entire school, just for pre-K, K, and 1, that's it. That's all we need. And then it kind of snowballs into a, no, wait a minute. What about elementary schools? In Ward 8, no, what about elementary schools in the city? Let's introduce Anacostia to everybody. And so it just grew and grew and grew. But my favorite part is probably research. For me, in this process, because I am not a native Washingtonian, I've been adopted by so many wonderful Washingtonians, though, I wanted to make sure that I represented the community very well, which meant that my data, the information, had to be accurate. So I had to go to the library, I had to go to my neighbors, I had to go to some park rangers and make sure that after collecting the information, then I had to triangulate the information. And then if I collected it from a book, then I had to make sure I reinforced the accuracy of that information by sitting at my neighbor's feet and listening to their stories, and making sure that I talked to other teachers in the community, and making sure that I talked to pastors, and making sure that I talked to the authentic cultural leaders. So let me give you an example. I have a map in the back of the book, and initially when I think my illustrator, he found the map for me, and it said something like, it depicted like all of this area here as Anacostia. And I thought, oh no, you don't. Because my neighbors and I, we get upset, and my neighbors really get upset when they see material that depicts east of the river, like everything east of the river as Anacostia. That's a big no-no. And that happens so often, even with very brand name popular newspapers today. So something like that may seem very minor to some, I had to fact check it. And so that's my favorite part, in making sure those facts are correct.
That's awesome. I mean, I do understand why you were a teacher to the younger age group. I see that in your book you emphasize each letter, and I picked up on that myself when reading it. Like this had to be for the younger children of the age group.
I wanted to make sure that the book it had staying power,
Mm-hmm.
and that teachers could use it. They could use it because of the pictures. They could use it because they could teach the alphabet.
Right.
They could use it because of use it with rhyming words for rhyming families. They could use it because of punctuation skills or capitalization skills or even homonyms that are in there. They could use it as a map to guide you through the community, and then you can go on a field trip in their own community, or invite new people to the community who have never visited Anacostia. And introduce new places and historic figures to people too. So I want to make sure that even though I shared, I said, yeah, it's for 0 to 5 or 6-year-olds, that actually I've used the same book with middle school students, with high school students, with elders, with alumni returning to Anacostia too.
Right, because I'm 18, but that book was very interesting. Like, knowing the Anacostia community, and one of the first things you hear is the big chair. So when I seen that in the book, I was like, wow.
Yes.
Like,
And how did that make you feel when you knew about the big chair and the big chairs in the book?
right, like it was interesting, because it was like, okay, I know that this book is about Anacostia, but I didn't expect it to be that detailed about those specific things, because that's a major thing that you hear about Anacostia, like Anacostia. Okay, people think of the big chair. That's one of the main things to hear
That's
about.
right. It's like if you mention the big chair, then definitely you know about Anacostia, you know about Southeast.
Right.
You can't come to DC without visiting the big chair. So it had to be incorporated into the book. And actually, in trying to decide like what's in it, what made the cut, what did not make the cut, it was really difficult, because I thought, okay, we have 26 letters in the alphabet. Let's just do a brain dump. And so I started asking someone, what's your favorite place in the community? Where do you like to go in the community? And where do I like to go? And started making a list, and then trying to match up the letter to the actual place or the person. No doubt, Big Chair made that first cut. It was, and now that I look at it, because this book was printed in like 2010, 2011, now there are new places, people, and I feel like, at some point we got to look back and then update. Some of the places that are included no longer exist.
Right.
So,
but it's something that makes history from back then. So it was like, maybe it could be something new, but it still tells you about the time period and what did go on from back then.
It does, but that big chair is forever, right? That big chair.
Okay, so our third question is, how did publishing your first book change your writing, and did your style, process, motivation? Did it change your style, process, motivation?
The first book? Ask me one more time.
Okay, so how did publishing your first book change your writing, and did it change your style, process, motivation?
You know what? When I first started, I don't think I had a style or a process. It was kind of, let's do a brain dump. Let's collect the information about the community, and then, like I said, match those letters and the information and see what we have. It was a constant editing process.
Right.
And so that was constant, no matter what. It's the editing, going back, writing some. Writing is rewriting, and then you write some more, and then you rewrite some more, and at some point you just have to cut it. Either it's time frames, or I usually get I get a physical feeling like, okay, I think I've captured it all. And for me, after writing, after editing, several iterations of editing, then I just put it down. I put it down for an entire year. Didn't touch it, put it in a drawer. I already allowed the librarian at my school to read it. I shared it at the time. I was an adjunct professor. I let some graduate students read it. I let some colleagues read it. I shared it with a couple of students and engaged with them. They seemed to like it. Put it in a drawer for an entire year. And it wasn't until, everybody has a kind of new goal in January. I thought, okay, I have the draft for a book, and I think I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go for it right now. My goal for this year is to get that book published. And that's what we have now.
So if I heard you correct, you said that when you're writing the books, you feel like sometimes that you done not done too much, but you wrote enough.
Mm-hmm.
So do you ever feel like a book has too much information, or there can be times when you put too much information into a book?
I think there can be times when you can put too much, or that I need some fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at something again and again and again, and you can tweak this. I could have tweaked it out some more. I could have added a little bit more, changed some rhyming words. At some point you say, stop, I'm going to do something else, or I need a rest,
Mm-hmm.
but my eyes need a break
Right.
from this book. And I took the entire year and then came back to it.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to do it again, I probably would have done the same process, but I would have shortened that time frame quite a bit instead of it being a year. Because
Mm-hmm.
now I encourage students, go through the process. Writing is rewriting.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happens in one session.
Right.
There's no. I
Nothing.
wrote it once. Okay, now I can take it to the editor, which is a biggie. To
Mm-hmm.
take it to the editor,
Mm-hmm.
take it to someone else, so that their fresh eyes
Mm-hmm.
can look over it too and give perspective to it. But definitely I encourage people, go ahead, write, rewrite, and then have somebody else take a look at it too. Sometimes what the writer thinks is really interesting or so
Right.
funny or it really rhymes, it's cute, it's on beat. No, it's not. It's not. And that happened to me. I'm like, this rhymes. My editor said, no, it doesn't. I'm like, no. And I'm like, yeah, see, I'm gonna make it fit. Yeah, and no, I needed it to be fixed.
Okay, so our fourth question. Both of your books, A for Anacostia and S is Southside, represents very distinct neighborhoods and cultures that aren't usually represented in children's stories. What inspired you to target these specific communities and give representation to the children that live in those communities?
Well, initially, my first home is Chicago, Illinois, on the south side of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I currently live in Anacostia, right here in Washington, D.C. Both of them awesome communities.
Right.
Even though I wrote A's for Anacostia first, when I went home back to Chicago, I had both students and my own parents basically harass me, and they said, wait a minute, you didn't say anything about Chicago kids. Kids in Chicago need to be represented too. I said, you're absolutely right. And so that was how the second book became a reality. Mm-hmm. It came about. And so I wanted to make sure, because the stories are similar and that, like you said, they're not necessarily represented in any particular story, but I wanted to highlight it because I've been residents and consider both places home.
Right.
And so the memories and the reality really that I have of both places are not represented, not on TV, not in magazines, not in movies or daily papers. And so though we can have different perspectives about where we live, where we play, where we visit, like when I take walks with my dog in the Anacostia River, and what I see and who I meet, my neighbors, I rarely hear stories about them when I'm reading papers, the daily paper, or when I'm looking at movies about DC or Anacostia, and definitely not on the south side of Chicago. So to me, this is just the beginning of getting this slice, my perspective out, my story out.
So being as though that you do have these two books for two different areas and two different neighborhoods, what difference, so you said they are similar. So I'm going to ask, what differences do you see in the children first?
The differences between like DC students and...
Well, did you teach in Chicago?
I did.
So yeah, what differences did you see in your teaching in Chicago than your teaching in Anacostia?
You know what? I see more similarities than differences. I mean, I could say things like the accents and where we live, and that's probably more common, more obvious things, right? But more similar things about like our identities are very clear. Like my kids from the South Side, to say I'm from the South Side, that's part of an identity. Like we cherish that we're not West or that we're not North. And in Chicago, there is no East. That's Lake Michigan. But it's those experiences that make us who we are. So we take the negative, and even though you hear negative stories on TV or in the paper, we're like, forget that. I'll take whatever experiences I have, I make it into what it is, and I'll make something right. And I see the same thing with the DC students too, with my Anacostia students, because like I said, I used to be a teacher right there, walk up to my school minutes away from my home, so it's right there in the community, and I see the same thing. It's like all those negative stats, all those experiences, it's like we're not only made up of negative things, there's some positive things going on in our community, and we're tough, and I would say, when I say we tough, like the educators, the teachers, and the families that they come from, they're tough, and so they have a lot of information to give. There's a lot of history. I see that in both places too, with both groups of students. Like knowing the history, there's a little bit. I don't think of my book like as a history book, but it definitely incorporates historical figures and places. So the idea of like we have history, like living history in both places, that are interacting with all of us on a daily basis. That's the one too.
That's good. Those books, oh wow.
I'm glad you enjoyed them.
It's because it's like, looking at the front of it, you wouldn't think that it's for someone older, but me being someone older, just the cover of it, it was like, I wanted to read this. Like, what was it about? Like, if there were more alphabets, I know you would have made more letters to keep the kids interested in it.
You know what though? I have to give a lot of thanks to Jerry Kraft. He was the he's the illustrator for the book, and so he, as I would say, like my grandmother would say, you put your foot in it when something's real good. You know, like you put your foot in it when you have really good grains or some good cornbread. Like it tastes so good, and he put his foot in his book. Like he made sure that the illustrations pop off the page. He made sure that they were very vibrant, and that even if the words were erased out of this book, it would still be a page turner. And that's him. If it was left up to me, there would be stick figures. I think, yeah, I'm the one with the words. He's the one with the illustration.
Awesome.
But he did an awesome job. And our process for working together, so he's not a native Washingtonian. I'm not a native Washingtonian, but I live in Anacostia, so I had to make sure that he knew about Anacostia, so that would inform his drawings. So I would send him, I would look online, Google, look online, and find all these articles about Anacostia and then send them to him. And so he would take a look, and he was just like, really? And I said, yeah, it's really okay. Here's my vision. I want to make sure that this book reflects intergenerational families. I want to make sure it reflects a variety of complexions, of outerwear and clothing, to make sure it looks like it's hip. It could be timeless. So you wouldn't say, yeah, that kid, he looks like he's from the 1960s versus the 21st century. And so I want to make sure that, you know, it was, as the kids would say, it's popping. Like, I want to make sure the hairstyles, there's some cornrows, there's some, you know, twists, there's some braids, there's some fades. And so I want to make sure that he had to know, like, who are these kids? So I had to send him pictures of students I've had. I went around the neighborhood and I took pictures of the big chair. I took pictures of Frederick Douglass's home, and I took pictures along Anacostia River. People were sitting out by their cars or sitting down having barbecues because he had never been here before, ever. So I had to, okay, this is what I think I want to see in the book. So let me go out and try and find that vision and then pass on to him, and then he took off. Artistic license, it was all in his hands. And so then I think within 30, definitely less than 60. It's less than 60 for sure. I would say somewhere like it was in a month or so. Okay, so he would send me like general sketches that were light blue, and then he would send them to me. I'm like, oh, this is great. I like this, or I don't like this. No coloring at all. And then we would go through, and then he came here. I think we met in Maryland, and so on paper, I'm like, oh my goodness, okay. And then we finalized the sketches, and then from there, he took off with the actual pictures on the laptop with colors and things. He's like, all right, Court, no, we cannot change that red top into a blue top, or you know, that kind of detail. I didn't care about that kind of stuff, but things like, one of my favorite pages here is in the deli. So on this page where it says D is for the awesome food that I buy at the deli. It makes me lick my lips and rub my belly. And it's really important that the clerk in the deli, he has on a wedding band. And so I didn't want to shout any messages about Anacostia. I just wanted to share, and we were just having discussions. And Jerry, he put that out there when I looked, I'm like, oh, that's so cool that he has a wedding band. I'm like, see, we do that too. That's the message that to me it was a whisper. You look at it and it's like, we do that. We're neighborly. We wear the knots in our hair too, which is cool, super cool to me, you know. But just that was important to me. Just to have that there. It was important to me to have grandmothers and their grandsons, intergenerational mixes of family. It was important to have people of different complexions in the same family as well, to mix up and to even have an introduction or a conversation in families about, or in classrooms, about the skin that you're in and how you should be proud about that. That's here. So that's one of those, like, you can use this book to talk about that as well. Even talk about coming to, this one for E is for excitement of a changing neighborhood, because meeting new friends makes me feel so good. And so we talk about the changes of new neighbors coming in, which is a huge issue in the community of talking, not just new neighbors, but that opens up conversations about who's moving to our neighborhood. We talk about gentrification with this book. All right, it's like an intro for that.
It's definitely tied to the change in neighborhood and making it an excitement.
Absolutely, because it can go left quick in some of our conversations, which is fine because it's just a discussion. You know, we're just talking about it together.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this question. Since we have the book open, I'm going to ask, if you had to choose one page in the book, which one do you think represents the Anacostia community the most?
Ooh, okay. I have a picture for it. Look, I'm torn. I know you told me to pick one, but as much as we've been talking about the big chair, because the big chair, okay, I'll go with the big chair. I really want to go with C is for community though. Okay, let me stick with my original one.
You can tell us one and then tell us why you like both of them.
Okay, I really like B is for the big chair that rises above the street. I imagine sitting up high while dangling my feet, because if you come to Anacostia and you don't see that big chair, then you haven't visited Anacostia, and everybody knows about the big chair. Whether they live in Anacostia or even outside of Anacostia, I find out that people, they know about the big chair. And kids, I've talked to kids, they know about the big chair. Like, this is a hot fact. And I get that, Lord, come on over. Come on over to Anacostia and look at the big chair. Now they have a fence around it, so you can't climb the big chair, but people take pictures. It's like a tourist spot. You know about the history of the big chair. There used to be a woman in a glass house who lived on top of the big chair. I know, it's a wild story. Wow. It's wild. But I have to say, in addition to the B, it would be the C. C is for my community. Whenever I'm alone, their smiles, support, and hugs remind me that I'm home. And right here, this little chocolate drop right here is just being loved on by the grandmother. I'm thinking auntie, neighbors, grandfather maybe, or sister. Just everybody he's surrounded by love. And so this, to me, that's what I think we can move towards the vision. And some people are even experiencing that now. I can think of some neighbors that I have and some friends of the family that live right in the neighborhood, and those sons are being loved on by multiple people in their family and that extended family, that block family that's looking out for them too.
And I see the love being shown between all of them. It's like she's very different from everyone else, but the love is still being spread amongst the rest of them.
Yes, that's our building community and how we do that. And I think since I've moved into the community, that's almost 16 years ago that I've lived in the community. But since day one, I have experienced neighbors that were caring, that watched out for me. In the book, I talk about Mrs. Wade. She is a real neighbor of mine who lives next door. And she would look, believe me, Miss Wade sees all. Nothing happens on our block without her knowing about it, which is an awesome thing. Knowing that I have neighbors that are caring, that are sharing, that want to see me well, and I want to help take care of them. We share, neighborhood secrets. They tell me the history sitting on the porch. We have popsicle socials and ice cream socials with each other and bond. And so it's been a really good experience. It's been a very good experience.
So on page 16, you wrote about a little boy wanting to open up his own store when he grows up. And the image displays him opening a bookstore. Based on the lack of bookstores currently in Ward 7 and 8, how important was it for you to portray his image?
You know what? For Devin, I wanted to make sure of a couple of things. And again, Jerry Craft is the one I have to thank for this, because these books are of other self-published authors that we're familiar with. And so we wanted to have an opportunity. He took this opportunity to display their books in this store. But the idea of entrepreneurship, owning, being a store owner, I thought that was important to, again, start that discussion. And using this book to do this, like, so what do you want to do? Oh, okay, you can have beautiful gardens in your front yard, or you can own your own store, just provide options for different professions that this could be used just as an experience, just to jump off the page. But it's also telling him that it's almost with intention and manifestation that we're talking about opening up bookstores, because now, this is many years since the first publishing of this book, we now have Mahogany Books. We now have Charnice Milton Co-op, the bookstore. We have a few more outlets that have cropped up in our community so that we can access some books. So the more the merrier that we have, that so we can see some books and books that we're writing, that people in the community are actually writing as well. So it's really good and positive for our students to know that. It's within steps, literally the store is in steps, of the school. Ketchum Elementary, for example, is right down the street from Mahogany Books. I get a kick out of that. It's right down the street from the public library too. So from now to both of the libraries in our community have been modernized. Really, 1, 2, 3, 4 in Ward 7 and 8. So it's so awesome. Our neighborhood has been known as a book desert. It continues to be known as a book desert because we have to discuss about the lack of access to books. So it's great that we have libraries. It's great that we have a co-op right there, and we have radio. It's fantastic that we have Mahogany Books. But I'm not going to say it has to end there. We need more opportunities so that we can not only reach out and access books, but also the kinds of books that we reach out to grab. That, representation matters, and we should see ourselves in those books, both as characters, but also as writers.
In what ways has living in the Anacostia community impacted you? And also, what inspired you to write a book about the Anacostia neighborhood? Well, we can elaborate more on the second question. We can elaborate.
Moving to Anacostia, anything, again, I moved there. I've been living on the East Coast for a while, but living in Anacostia, I didn't do. I'm a researcher by trade, but I didn't do any research on Anacostia. I moved there and knew very little about Anacostia. But since moving there and living in the community for almost 16 years, there's no way I could have done it without my neighbors and cultural leaders and people in the community, park rangers, the kids, knowing, and also the Anacostia Community Museum, which is an awesome resource. Oh my goodness, I love that place. I go there and I go to the Anacostia Community Neighborhood Library. Those are my two favorite. I'm just sitting down, or in the Frederick Douglass, and there's Anacostia River. So there's so many different places, but definitely just the resources there. You can't come to that community to live without knowing about some kind of history.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily mean history like you have to dust off the history book
Right.
and read about something that happened 100 years ago. That's not the kind of history. I don't want to limit it to that.
Mhm.
I'm talking about the history of, remember I told you about Mrs. Wade who lives next door. I could ring her doorbell, and I rang her doorbell. We're just sitting on the porch. I'm just sitting at her feet. She's in a chair, and I'm just sitting on the step. Me and my dog just enjoying her stories.
Mhm.
Or my neighbor on the corner, like, that's living history.
Mhm.
They've been living in the community for 30 years.
Wow.
30 years is a drop in the bucket, but what they've experienced in those 30 years, I'm like, one day I'll be able to get a chance, you know, to be that 30-year-old resident.
Mhm.
Give me 14, 15 more years, and then
Wow.
I'll have somebody sitting at my feet on the porch, and I can share a little bit of something
Mhm.
there. So there's no way for anyone to come to the community and not be kind of like that empty glass.
Right.
But people are constantly pouring in.
Mhm.
Even now, the most current history would be the hashtag Don't Mute DC
Right.
about gentrification and we talk about go
Mhm.
music, the history of, but there's no way that you can come to an Anacostia community and not knowing anything.
Mhm.
Ronald Moulton is right there. Check it right there on MLK. It's in steps of where I live. There's no way that I could go there and he wouldn't tell me something, you know,
Mhm.
about the movement. He has meetings there. Community meetings are all over their community. There's no
Mhm.
way not to be educated about being involved in something. So in that way, when I moved to Anacostia, what I knew for sure, I wanted to be involved in the community, but what I knew for sure is like there were multiple ways to access that. What would that look like?
Mhm.
I could be involved, volunteer at the school, Ketchum Elementary, for example,
Mhm.
or Lucy Moulton Elementary, or Anacostia High School. If literacy is my thing, be a volunteer there. Or if I wanted to volunteer at the park, Frederick Douglass's home,
Right.
go there. Or at UPL, United Planning Organization, which is a citywide nonprofit. Wonderful. Be a volunteer. I chose to be a volunteer with them. So there is always an opportunity. Be a friend of the library. You just pick. It's all there. Work needs to be done.
Mhm.
And you just have access. They just tell you, they don't tell you what to do. They just say, here, they lay it out for you. So where would you like to volunteer? What would you like to do? What would you like to learn? It's all there for you to choose.
So many opportunities from that one neighborhood that
Oh,
people
yes.
think so less of.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
People think it's so poor. And in some ways, I understand why they would think it was so poor, but what they don't, what's missing is why they don't see why it's so wealthy.
Right. In the long run,
Mhm.
or I mean, it can be in the long run, or it can
Absolutely.
too be short term. But you never know what you'll get out of it by doing that one volunteer service, or just anything small that you could potentially do in the long run that'll help you.
Absolutely. And it's so rich with information,
Mhm.
so rich with history. Remember, not the history like 100 years ago. We have living history. We have living activists. We have living doers. They're getting it done. And they need some more help. So that's why we need to continue to share with people who move to the community, the people who are already there, because sometimes we have to do more than one thing.
Right.
We can't just focus on one area, even though, you know, folks, they go to school during the day, they go to work during the day, then you have to come home, and you have families, and you have all these other activities, but you still have to go to the community meeting.
Right.
You still have to contact your counselor or your ANC rep.
Mhm.
You still have to make testimony and go down to Judiciary Square and go speak in front of politicians to get your point across. You still have to send an email. You still have to write a letter.
Mhm.
Because if we don't activate for our own community and advocate for our own community, nobody else will.
It all starts with you and your community.
It does. It does.
So that's the illustrations done by Mr. Joy Crafts are amazing. As an author, how did you go about finding an illustrator that will create an image that will perfectly capture the story you are trying to tell?
Great question. You know, initially, I met Jerry Craft years ago. I was a teacher in another school, and he was an illustrator giving a presentation to another classroom, and I just happened to see him by the front door of the school, and I was like, oh, well, what are you here to do? And he told me, like, oh, you know what, one day I'm going to write a children's book. That was it. That's all I said. I had no idea. That's how the world works. You just say things out loud. That's just part. It's so important to say what you want, your dreams, and write them down and say them out loud, because that's just step one. You're giving like the world an opportunity to conspire and make it happen. So that's why we also have to be careful what we say out loud. And he was so generous with his information, like the process. It's like, oh, okay, I'm an illustrator, and so he didn't say anything about like, this is what I can do for you. He said just in general, he told me about illustrating in general. And I just thought, this is a great conversation. Thanks, Mr. Kraft. And I went back up to my office, and he went back to the classroom. That was it. Years after that, I had, if you want to call it like a mentor to help me with A's for Anacostia. And so she helped to identify illustrators for the book. And guess what? Jerry Taps was the illustrator on her team. But you know what? I ended up choosing someone else. I chose someone else, and it did not work out very well. Very talented person, but I'll tell you this, from that artist, I learned it's really important what you want, but also it's just as important to know what you don't want.
Right.
And I found out, I was like, I don't really want like the clothes looking like that. This particular artist, she's really talented, but it just wasn't what I wanted. And so then I had to go back to the drawing board and say, this helped me to fine tune exactly, or at least get closer to what I thought I wanted. So I went back to my mentors, illustrators, because she had more than one. And I said, if you could ask them like how he made it was a picture, I want to say, of the bull by the library. And I said, how can we make this more DC? Like, this looks like any kind of picture you could find. It's really cool, but make it more DC. And he drew cherry blossoms by the library with this character, and I just thought,
wow.
Oh, this is DC, cherry blossoms, and it's the library, my favorite place. So, as you can see, he's talented, and he really, like, I just told him the larger picture and sent him that information, and he took off with it. If I could do it, if I could share some information with other self-published authors, I would say if they were looking for an illustrator, I always look for recommendations. Take a look at their history of work, some samples. Because some people say, well, you know, even if you have a test, like, can you draw like this test illustration for me? Nothing based, does it have to be in colors? Just sketch it out, and just so you get an idea. You want to meet them maybe a time or two to see how you vibe together, because I do believe in energy, and sometimes we're the best of people who want to work together, but it's just a head-to-head. It doesn't feel right, and so you have to go with that kind of energy. So
my next question is, was there something that you felt like you had to come off the top and tell Jerry, this is what I don't completely want, like, just don't want this in my book at all, I don't want that person or that particular body figure or something like that?
You know what? I told him that it was okay to show the diversity of us. That's what I knew for sure that I wanted in the book. Diversity of hair styles, hair textures, diversity of clothing, what I meant, like, so the elders, they may have long sleeve shirts, or for the kids that have on jeans, go ahead, you can have some kids with a little bit of baggy jeans, not too baggy, you know, not too low, but making sure that somebody can find themselves, or somebody they know who looks like them in here. And he nailed it. He nailed it. He did really an excellent job. I'm so pleased. When I saw it, I was just like, I tried to get you done. I'm so happy.
Do you know about how long it took him to finish the entire book?
Ooh, it was just a few months. I would say less than 6 months. And that wasn't all of him. That wasn't him drawing. A lot of that is just going back and forth. Us
The editing
talking.
process?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because then he was sketching, and there were different layers of sketches. So it was the blue sketch, and then there was a sketch on paper, and then there's the sketch, I call it the electronic version of that, and then it's the, okay, are we sure now? You know, this is my first book, so like everybody doesn't have to look like this. I want you to make Devin look like my cousin, and that kind of, I was just like, no. He gave me a limit, like, Courtney, 2 edits, 2 rounds of edits, and then we need to move on. And so, yeah, I got to like sit down, some foundation, and I set down the things, and I'm like, I must have these things. It must show the diversity of us, and it worked out well. It worked out very well. That way we wrote another book.
Okay, so
together.
do you feel like there's something missing from your book that, like we talked about earlier, some books may have too much information or some books may not have enough. So do you feel like in your book, specifically talking about Anacostia or even as for Southside, there may be something, it doesn't have to be historical, but is there something that you would have added if you not necessarily had more time or not necessarily more alphabets, but just something you would have added that you did not?
You know what? No. I put it on the field. I left it on the field. You know, I played my hardest. I left it on the field, or handed it off to Jerry. I think he left it on the field. I think he even took it. He leveled up. I mean, that song by Sierra, Level Up, Level Up. He just went all out of control with S's for Southside. That he added some more effects to S's for Southside, like H is for the hawk. And he has the kid holding on to a stop sign. He's kind of being blown away because the wind was so strong. Yeah, he really but I wouldn't change anything. If anything, I would update, you know, just because things in the community have changed. But I wouldn't touch the style, the process, how this came to be at all. We did the exact same process, same, you know, playful relationship, work relationship. Same thing with S's for Southside. Oh yeah, wouldn't change a thing.
If you had to choose one student, either from Anacostia or either from Chicago.
Oh, okay.
It could be one from both or
Okay,
just one period that really pushed you even more outside of your family, like your parents and your grandparents, to make these books.
That pushed me. You know what? I'm gonna say there were some students that I had that were my students. They were younger in elementary school when I had them, and then I reconnected with them. They were probably in 5th or 6th grade by that time, and they saw I was doing something at Frederick Douglass's national site, and they saw the book. It was an activity with little kids, and they saw the book, and they were, the 5th graders were excited about it, and I just thought, okay, I think I'm on to, they're the ones who gave me the reinforcement, like, I think you're on to something, that if little ones could be excited about our community, and now I've got the attention of older ones who are in 5th and 6th grade, because middle school's rough, like, those students they don't play. That I was excited to know, like, you're still interested, like, if the words didn't grab me, which I wouldn't think the words would, because they're older students, but the illustrations did, and they still saw themselves. They definitely connected with that. And I would also add, who these folks aren't students, but I met a couple, and they probably in their 70s, maybe even 80s. I met them at a book festival, and they checked out the book, they looked at the book, and it said, done well, you make us proud. And I was like, that's all I needed to hear. That's all I needed to hear, because that's all I was like, the elders think that I'm on the right track. They gave me their blessing. I'm like, okay, Because if they did not, I'm like, I would be just so disappointed. I would take this book off the shelf. You wouldn't see A.H. Anacostia anywhere. If Native Washingtonians, the best compliment ever would be like, oh. So where you were born in D.C.?
Yes, I was.
You were. So the best compliment for me was someone asked me, they're like, so where were you? They assumed that I was born in D.C. And I'm like, no, I was born in Chicago. But it's the best compliment ever to think that someone thinks that I'm from D.C.
Right.
because of A.H. Anacostia. If I get the stamp from a Washingtonian, a native Washingtonian, like, really? Like, you're not from here? I'm like, I just been living here for a little, and that's a drop in the bucket. Like, 15
just
years
reading
of
the
job.
book.
So it's cool.
I didn't think that, like, just having the book and reading it, I wouldn't think you were from elsewhere. Like, so, like, people don't take the time to learn about certain places, especially if they're not from there. So, just me having a book and reading it, seeing your name, I would have thought the same thing. Like,
Thank
so
you.
much, and
Thank
people
you.
do not think about places. Well, I would take that back. Some people do think about places that they're not from, but they wouldn't take the time to think deeper into that and learn more about these historical sites or the community of the Anacostia, or not even just Anacostia. A lot of neighborhoods that they're not from, or Washington D.C. period, people wouldn't take the time to think about it. So me just having a book and reading it, I honestly did think that you were from here.
Thank you.
I really
Thank you. That's the highest compliment to me. Thank you very much. I'm telling you, I wish I would do something wrong in this book. My neighbors would get me. I can't go home and have this book on the streets and not accurately reflect the people I know and love that are in Anacostia and that are in the community but are on my block, that are my next door neighbors that visit my house. I go to their homes, I walk around the neighborhood. Like, this is my home. I don't intend on being anywhere else. I choose to be here. So it was imperative, again, that process of writing, of researching, of making sure. I had a focus group, so I asked my neighbors before anything was printed, what do you think about this? And that's how with the map, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this map, it shows everything east of the rivers. And I was like, oh no, we've got to find another map. That doesn't reflect our community. You're supposed to have a little star and say, Anacostia is here. That's what's in there now. But yeah, that was really, really important. Really important.
So my next question is, do you think that your future books will continue following this same emphasizing the letter concept? The alphabet, the 26 letters?
We have one more alphabet book that I think that will be the end. The third one, F is for family reunion. And it will focus on the same concept. But family reunion is just more broad, because with family reunions, my assumption is that so many of us have family reunions, so it's all over. People think specific, DMV or DC, Chicago, learning experiences. With family reunions, it's everywhere. California to New York, down south. I used to go to Memphis, Tennessee. Family reunions, what are all those traditions? So I can't wait to really get into the research and get into what are those traditions that families have around their family reunions.
So now that you've told us that your next book will be Family Reunion, that is the new book that you're working on. What can you give us, not so much a sneak peek, but can you tell us a little bit more of how you'll go about making that book or writing that book?
That I can tell you straight out, it's going to be the same process. The same process to writing A is for Anacostia, S is for Southside, and that process doesn't change. It works. We're not going to change what works. That definitely works. And collaborating, getting the research, making sure that it's accurate, having a focus group, and probably multiple ones on the front end, and then make sure those illustrations pop.
Just like in for Anacostia.
That's the hope. That's the plan. Yes. And hopefully, like, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm not sure if it's going to be ready by the East of the River Book Festival. However, I want to share with you that there will be many, many, many books that will be available to readers of all ages across the whole city. We invite all readers to come out to the Black Box Theater that's right there on 1801 Mississippi Avenue. Come on out on October 5th, that's a Saturday, and everyone's invited to the East of the River Book Festival from 11 to 4. We are going to have an awesome time. I like to say that it is the largest book festival where you can also wear a costume representing your favorite character or a favorite author. Yes. So you know you have to come on out.
Yes,
there will be so many authors there with a focus on self-published authors, small presses, and independent bookstores. So we always have an awesome time. It's our 6th year, and we jam. Oh my goodness, there are storytellers, there are poets there, lots of books to buy, lots of stories to be told and act out, and we have a ball. We have a ball. So I hope you come out.
I will. Well, Dr. David, it's been a good time interviewing with you. I really loved your book. I'm happy to take it home and share it with the rest of my peers. Okay. Do you have any more of the S for Southside copies?
Absolutely. If anyone wants to go to the website, so my website is www.drdavis, Courtney, COURTNEY, DAVIS.com. And you can also find out some more information about the East of the River Book Festival, and that website is www.eotrbookfest.com. We're also on Facebook, IG, Instagram, and Twitter. And so am I.
Well, you guys, I've had a good time with the lovely Dr. Davis, and she's explained so much to us about her book, A for Anacostia.
Thank you for having me, Makayla. It's been an awesome time.
I love you. Thank you.